In 1898, an author named Morgan Robertson wrote a remarkable piece of fiction about a luxurious ocean liner, larger than any ship in the world at the time. It was filled with wealthy passengers and loaded with priceless cargo. On its maiden voyage, this ship, labeled Unsinkable, struck an iceberg one cold, starry April night and sank in the North Atlantic. Since the ship was unsinkable, naturally lifeboats were a bit of an afterthought, leading to a massive loss of life. Sound familiar? 14 years after this book was published, a British shipping company, the White Star Line, built a vessel of almost exactly the same dimensions as those imagined by Robertson. It too boasted a list of wealthy and famous passengers and made the audacious claim of being unsinkable. One starry night in the North Atlantic, April 14, 1912, it struck a giant iceberg and vanished beneath the seas. The most startling parallel of all? Robertson named his fictional ship the Titan. Its real-life counterpart, as we all know, was the Titanic. I'm Keith Conrad, and this is Sidequests, where I explore the weird rabbit holes I fall down. In this series, we're looking at the story of the Titanic disaster, a rabbit hole I've been falling down since I was 3 years old, when the wreck was discovered in 1985 and my dad brought home a copy of the National Geographic documentary Secrets of the Titanic.
Few observers found this giant threatening and wrote of her nightmare scale. But their forebodings fell short of the event, for the fate of this ship still fascinates the world, and her name is a synonym for tragedy.
After listening to the dulcet tones of Martin Sheen, I was hooked. It's a big story and also one of the most important stories of the 20th century. It all starts at a dinner party. On a warm summer evening in 1907 in a townhouse on Belgrave Square in London's most fashionable district, two men lingered over brandy after dinner. J. Bruce Ismay and Lord William Peary remained at the table, smoke from their cigars curling toward the ornate ceiling. Ismay was 45, managing director of the White Star Line. Peary was 60, chairman of Harland and Wolff Shipbuilders in Belfast. They had a problem. Cunard, their great rival, had launched two new ships that threatened to render White Star's entire fleet obsolete. The Lusitania and Mauretania, with turbines pushing them to 25 knots, were capturing the public imagination and, more importantly, passengers. Speed was Cunard's game. White Star couldn't match it. Size was a completely different story. What if White Star didn't race Cunard at all? What if instead they built ships so large, so luxurious that speed was irrelevant? Not liners, but floating hotels, palaces on the sea. Somewhere in that conversation, one of them reached for a menu or napkin. A pencil appeared, and there 3 ships took shape. Olympic, Titanic, Britannic, 882 feet long, 46,000 tons, almost exactly 100 feet longer than Lusitania and Mauretania. 4 funnels, Turkish baths, swimming pools, grand staircases, the largest moving objects ever created by human hands. The men looked at the sketch, then at each other. It was possible. More than possible. Inevitable. But to understand why these two men believed they could build the impossible, you have to understand the world that made such confidence normal. Between 1880 and 1910, the world had been transformed with a speed that seemed almost miraculous. Electric light, replacing gas and candles, turning night into day at the flip of a switch. The telephone, voices traveling instantly across continents. The automobile, transforming how humans move through space. The wireless, Marconi's miracle, sending messages through the air itself. Ships at sea could now talk to shore. The Wright brothers had achieved powered flight in 1903. By 1907, it was clear humans would soon conquer the air. One after another, impossibilities became commonplace. The miraculous became mundane, and nowhere was this transformation more dramatic than at sea. When Ismay's father founded White Star Line in 1869, the finest Atlantic liners were wooden paddle steamers that took weeks to cross. By 1907, ships were steel leviathans that could cross in under a week. Each innovation reinforced a philosophy that was becoming the dominant religion of the age: belief in unlimited progress. The idea that humanity had turned a corner, that science and engineering could solve any problem, prevent any disaster, As the Shipbuilder magazine would say about these new vessels, the captain may, by simply moving an electric switch, instantly close the doors throughout and make the vessel practically unsinkable. Practically unsinkable. That word, practically, would disappear in the retelling.
When anyone asks me how I can best describe my experiences of nearly 40 years at sea, I merely say uneventful. I have never been in an accident of any sort worth speaking about. I never saw a wreck and have never been wrecked, nor was I ever in any predicament that threatened to end in disaster of any sort.
Captain Edward Smith, White Star's most senior commander, speaking in 1907, he would be given command of the Titanic for her maiden voyage. In 1907, this all seemed not just possible, but inevitable. Anything could be built. Any challenge could be met. The future was unsinkable. White Star Line never advertised the Titanic as unsinkable. Not once, but everyone else did. Trade journals described her as practically unsinkable. Newspapers announced the ship that cannot sink. The word spread through the culture like a rumor everyone wanted to believe. By the time Titanic sailed, she wasn't practically unsinkable. She was unsinkable. Absolutely. The word became part of her name, and there was evidence to support the belief. Olympic had been sailing for nearly a year. She'd survived a collision with HMS Hawk, a warship that struck her amidships. The Hawk's bow was crushed. Olympic remained afloat, returning to port under her own power. The incident seemed to prove the design. These ships could take damage and keep going.
The world had waited expectantly for its launching and sailing, had read accounts of its tremendous size and luxury, had felt it a matter of satisfaction that such a safe boat had been designed, the unsinkable lifeboat, and then in a moment to hear that it had gone to the bottom with 1,500 passengers. The improbability of such a thing was what staggered humanity. Lawrence Beasley, second-class passenger.
This was the considered judgment of educated people who had every reason to believe that human ingenuity had made the Atlantic crossing safe. The Titanic represented more than White Star's ambition. She represented a worldview, the belief that humans had mastered their environment, that careful planning and technology could eliminate risk, that British engineering was supreme, that the 20th century would be a century of progress, prosperity, and peace. To understand why the Titanic mattered, why her sinking shocked the world beyond the death toll, you have to understand what the world believed in 1912. The Edwardians believed they had figured it out. Science had explained the world. Medicine had conquered disease. Engineering had conquered distance. Even death seemed conquerable. Serious scientists were investigating whether consciousness survived bodily death. If science could explain everything else, why not immortality? And underlying all of this was a philosophy, social Darwinism, the belief that societies like species evolved from lower to higher forms, that competition produced progress, that the successful deserved success and the unsuccessful deserved failure. It explained everything. Why Europeans were wealthy and Africans poor, evolution. Why the upper classes were rich and working classes poor. They deserved it. Everything had an explanation. Everything fit the pattern. Everything was proceeding according to plan.
The pleasure and comfort which all of us enjoyed upon this floating palace seemed an ominous feature to many, including myself, who felt it almost too good to last without some terrible retribution inflicted by the hand of an angry omnipotence. Archibald Gracie, first-class passenger.
Colonel Archibald Gracie, traveling first class on Titanic. He survived and wrote a detailed account before dying 7 months later, his health broken by that night. Almost too good to last. As if some part of him knew, because there were cracks. King Edward VII had died in 1910. The era named for him was already over. Labor strikes were disrupting Britain. Suffragettes were becoming militant. Ireland was on the brink of civil war. Germany and Britain were locked in a naval arms race, but these seemed manageable. Technology would help. Better communications would ease tensions. Scientific management would solve industrial disputes. The Titanic would prove it. She was a promise that confidence was justified, that the future really was as bright as everyone believed.
There was peace, and the world had an even tenor to its way. It seems to me that the disaster about to occur was the event that woke the world with a start, keeping it moving at a rapidly accelerating pace ever since, with less and less peace, satisfaction, and happiness. To my mind, the world of today awoke April 15th, 1912. Jack Thayer, first-class passenger.
Jack Thayer, 17 when he survived the Titanic. He was right. April 15th, 1912 was the moment the world woke up. On April 2nd, 1912, sea trials were completed in Belfast. The Board of Trade declared the ship seaworthy. That night, Titanic departed for Southampton. On April 10th, passengers would board. At noon, she would depart, calling at Cherbourg that evening, Queenstown the next morning. Then she would turn west into the Atlantic. 5 days from New York, 4 days from disaster, the largest ship in the world carrying the hopes and certainties of an entire age. An age that had 10 days left to live. 2 years later, the Great War would begin. Millions would die in trenches. Empires would collapse. The old certainties would shatter. But the Titanic was first. The warning, the moment when the unsinkable ship sank. When progress failed. When confidence met reality and reality won. For premium subscribers, we go much deeper. The economics of the immigrant trade, the personalities behind the ship, the coal strikes and suffragettes of spring 1912, and why this particular disaster mattered so profoundly. Visit newsidequests.com to hear the full episode. Next time, building the Titanic. The workers who died constructing her, the rivets that failed, the design flaw no one saw, and the lesson that taught the wrong lesson about safety, how the unsinkable ship was built, and why it was doomed from the moment the first keel plate was laid.